Chapter 2. The Manipulator's Playbook, Tactics Used to Control and Deceive. In the previous chapter, we laid the groundwork by defining manipulation and gaslighting and understanding the toxic dynamics at play. Now, we take a closer look at the manipulator's playbook, how they operate, the psychological tactics they use, and the devastating impact these strategies have on their victims. Recognizing these tactics is crucial because awareness is a first step in breaking free from their control and regaining a sense of autonomy and self-trust. The subtle web of manipulation. Manipulators are far from one-dimensional. They don't rely on a single overt technique. Instead, they weave together a combination of subtle and more obvious strategies, crafting a complex web of influence and control that entangles their victims. These tactics often evolve over time, making it difficult for the victim to realize they are being manipulated until they've already been dragged deep into the manipulator's grip. These strategies are designed to confuse, disorient, and weaken their targets so they can be easily controlled. Let's break down the most common manipulation tactics that manipulators use. 1. Gaslighting, the reality distortion trap. Gaslighting is perhaps the most well-known manipulation tactic because of its subtle yet incredibly damaging nature. It involves the manipulator making the victim doubt their own perception of reality, memory, or sanity. A classic example of gaslighting is when a manipulator denies or twists past events to make the victim believe they are either forgetful, overreacting, or even crazy for remembering things differently. The gaslight might say, "That never happened," or "You're just imagining things," even when the victim is certain about the details of the situation. The goal is to slowly chip away at the victim's self-confidence, leaving them questioning their own thoughts, memories, and even their sanity. Over time, this creates emotional dependency, with the victim looking to the manipulator for validation and answers instead of trusting their own judgment. Example: imagine a partner who moves household items and then later insists the victim must be forgetful when they can't find those items. The manipulator's insistence that the victim's memory is faulty reinforces self-doubt. Gradually, the victim begins to second-guess their own perceptions, creating a sense of confusion and uncertainty. 2. Triangulation, pitting people against each other. Triangulation is a manipulation tactic where the manipulator creates conflict between the victim and other people, often friends, family members, or colleagues. The manipulator will speak negatively about one person to another, causing division and ensuring that the victim feels isolated and unsupported. This tactic works because it exploits feelings of insecurity and loneliness, forcing the victim to rely on the manipulator for connection and emotional validation. The manipulator's ability to divide and conquer not only isolates the victim, but also ensures that the manipulator has control over all parties involved. This tactic keeps the victim in a constant state of confusion and emotional instability, as they struggle to make sense of what is true and who they can trust. Example: a toxic boss might tell employee A that employee B is unreliable, while telling employee B that employee A is backstabbing them. This creates conflict between the two employees and isolates them from each other, leaving them both unsure of who to trust and making it easier for the manipulator to maintain control. 3. The guilt trap, controlling through obligation. Guilt is one of the most powerful tools a manipulator can use to gain control over someone. By making the victim feel responsible for things beyond their control, the manipulator can force them into submission. This tactic often includes statements like, "If you really loved me, you would," or "After everything I've done for you, how could you treat me like this?" Manipulators use guilt to exploit the victim's sense of duty or moral responsibility. They create an illusion of obligation, making the victim feel as if they are required to stay in a toxic relationship or situation out of gratitude or loyalty. Over time, the victim internalizes this guilt, making it increasingly difficult for them to break free from the manipulator's influence. Example: a parent might guilt their child into staying in a toxic family environment by constantly reminding them of past sacrifices. The child might feel as though they owe their parent for everything they've done, leading them to tolerate emotional abuse or mistreatment in the name of familial duty. 4. Love bombing, overwhelming with affection to gain control. Love bombing is a manipulation tactic that often occurs early in a relationship. It involves overwhelming the victim with excessive flattery, attention, affection, and promises of a future together. This intense, idealized version of love is designed to create an emotional dependency in the victim. The manipulator showers the victim with praise and affection, making them feel special and deeply valued, which makes it hard to recognize the manipulator's true intentions. Once the victim becomes emotionally invested, the manipulator slowly withdraws affection, creating emotional instability. The victim is left longing for the initial intensity of the love bombing, which the manipulator withholds as a way to maintain control. Example: a new romantic partner may shower their significant other with constant compliments, expensive gifts, and promises of eternal love, only to later become distant, controlling, or manipulative. The victim, now emotionally attached, becomes desperate to return to the initial phase of affection and may tolerate poor treatment to experience the high of the love bombing phase once again. 5. Projection, accusing the victim of their own faults. Projection is a classic defense mechanism that manipulators use to avoid taking responsibility for their own faults and mistakes. Instead of owning their negative behavior, the manipulator accuses their victim of having the same faults. This tactic shifts the focus from the manipulator's actions to the victim's supposed shortcomings, making the victim feel as though they are at fault. This method is highly effective because it confuses the victim and makes them second-guess their behavior, even though they may have done nothing wrong. Projection helps the manipulator avoid accountability, further eroding the victim's sense of self-worth. Example: an abusive spouse might constantly accuse their partner of being controlling, even though they themselves are the one dictating every aspect of the relationship. This tactic not only deflects attention from the manipulator's behavior, but also creates a false narrative that the victim is a problem. 6. Gaslighting by proxy, recruiting others to enforce the lie. In more extreme cases, manipulators will recruit others, friends, family members, colleagues, or even strangers, to help reinforce their distorted version of events. This tactic, known as gaslighting by proxy, is meant to isolate the victim further and make them feel as though their perceptions are universally incorrect. The manipulator uses others as tools to spread their false narrative, making it more difficult for the victim to trust anyone, including themselves. When multiple people validate the manipulator's lies, the victim begins to feel even more disconnected from reality. Example: a toxic manager might convince an entire team that one employee is incompetent, even though the employee has a solid track record. As the team members begin to question the employee's competence, the victim loses confidence in their own abilities and begins to internalize the manipulator's false narrative. The psychological impact of these tactics: repeated exposure to manipulation and gaslighting causes severe psychological harm to the victim. The constant confusion, self-doubt, and emotional turmoil leave lasting scars that can affect their mental health and overall well-being. 1. Anxiety and depression. Chronic self-doubt and fear of making mistakes create a constant state of anxiety. Victims may feel on edge, constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing when they'll be criticized or invalidated. This leads to emotional exhaustion and often to depression, as the victim feels trapped and unable to escape the manipulative dynamic. 2. Low self-esteem. The manipulator's consistent undermining of the victim's sense of self leads to diminished self-worth. The victim begins to believe they are inherently flawed or incapable of making good decisions, which makes them more susceptible to further control and manipulation. 3. Emotional numbness. In an effort to cope with the constant emotional strain, some victims may emotionally detach from themselves and their surroundings. This dissociation is a defense mechanism that helps protect the victim from further psychological harm. However, it also makes it harder for the victim to process their emotions and move toward healing. 4. Decision paralysis. When every choice is criticized, invalidated, or scrutinized, victims may experience decision paralysis. They become so accustomed to deferring to the manipulator's judgment that they lose confidence in their own ability to make decisions. This dependency on the manipulator for guidance can keep the victim locked in an unhealthy dynamic. Breaking free, recognizing the red flags. Understanding manipulation is the first step toward regaining control. By recognizing the early warning signs of manipulation, you can take action before you become deeply entangled in the manipulator's web. Here are some practical strategies to help you identify red flags early. 1. Trust your gut. If something feels off, don't dismiss it. Intuition is often our best defense against manipulation. If you feel uncomfortable or confused by someone's behavior, take a step back and reflect on the situation. 2. Seek outside perspectives. Talk to trusted friends, family, or a therapist who can offer a more objective view of the situation. Sometimes, an outside perspective can help you see things more clearly and recognize manipulation patterns you may have missed. 3. Set boundaries. Establish clear and firm boundaries to protect yourself from manipulative behavior. Communicate what is and isn't acceptable and hold manipulators accountable when they cross those lines. 4. Document incidents. Keeping a journal of conversations, behaviors, and incidents that seem manipulative can help you track patterns over time. This documentation can also serve as evidence if you need to confront the manipulator or seek outside help. Conclusion: manipulators thrive on confusion, self-doubt, and control. By recognizing their tactics, we can dismantle their power over us. Awareness is key to breaking free from their grip and reclaiming our sense of self. In the next chapter, we will explore how to rebuild self-trust and confidence after experiencing manipulation. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about manipulation, the stronger your defense against it. Thank you for taking this step toward empowerment. Stay tuned for more, and don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share your thoughts with us. We're in this journey together.